In a moment no one could have predicted, Hollywood icon Denzel Washington broke down in uncontrollable tears during a live television appearance, the world watching as he received an unexpected call from none other than Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. What unfolded in that call stunned not only the studio audience, but millions across the globe. This powerful exchange shattered all boundaries, proving that true leadership, respect, and impact can travel beyond borders, beyond cultures, even beyond fame. It started like any other lighthearted late-night talk show. The crowd roared as Denzel walked onto the stage, composed, smiling, every bit the legend. The host met him with high energy, cracking jokes, playing clips from his latest film. But behind Denzel's warm laughter, something seemed distant. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Something was weighing on his spirit. Then halfway through the show, the host smirked and said, "We've got a little surprise for you tonight, Denzel." A live call from someone very far away. Denzel raised an eyebrow.
Ow!
A surprise? The screen behind him flickered to life. A flag appeared. Burkina Faso. Confused whispers spread through the crowd. Then, a calm, dignified voice echoed through the studio. "Good evening, Mr. Washington. This is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition in Burkina Faso." Denzel froze. The room fell into absolute silence. For the first time in the show's history, you could hear nothing but the sound of one man's breath catching in his throat. No one could have foreseen what happened next. The president's voice, gentle, respectful, laced with a soft French accent, continued. "You don't know me, Mr. Washington. But when I was 14, a barefoot boy in Burkina Faso, I watched you in glory. I saw a black man, not afraid, not begging, strong, proud, crying for justice." Denzel's eyes blinked fast, filling. That night, Ibrahim said, "I told my mother one day, I too will fight for people, just like him." The host sat stunned. Denzel raised a trembling hand to his mouth. Years later, Ibrahim continued, "When my people needed someone to stand, I remembered your face, your fire, your eyes. I stood not because I felt brave, but because I had seen what bravery looked like. In you, the room was silent." Denzel slowly lowered his hand, eyes now red, voice cracking. "You're telling me I helped shape a president?" Sir Ibrahim replied gently. "You helped shape a man who refused to kneel before injustice." A tear slid down Denzel's cheek. "Thank you, my brother." Yes. The crowd exhaled, quiet gasps filling the studio. But Ibrahim wasn't done. Denzel leaned in, the host still frozen, speechless. Then Ibrahim spoke again. "Today I speak not only as a president, but as a man who carries a debt. And in Burkina Faso, when someone saves your soul, we never forget." Denzel shook his head, overwhelmed. "Please." "I didn't, Mr. Washington," Ibrahim said warmly. "I'm officially inviting you to be honored in Ouagadougou. But more than that, I want to name a leadership school after you, a place where our children will learn to stand tall, just as I learned, watching you." The audience gasped again. The host whispered, "Wow." Denzel's voice was barely a whisper. "Mr. President, I don't deserve that." "That," Ibrahim said with a smile, "is exactly why you do." And then the screen went black. In front of millions, live on national television, Denzel Washington buried his face in his hands and wept, not from sorrow, but from the weight of a truth few people ever lived to realize, that one life lived with purpose can echo across oceans, across generations, and that moment was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, Denzel was packing his bags. Burkina Faso was calling, and what awaited him would shake the world. He didn't sleep that night. Traoré's words played over and over in his mind. His eyes stayed red long after the cameras stopped rolling. By morning, social media had erupted. Denzel Traoré was trending in over 20 countries. Fans, journalists, world leaders, all united in praise. Some called it the most powerful moment in television history. But while the world was watching, Denzel was quietly preparing not for a role, not for a premiere, but for something deeper, something sacred. He booked the earliest flight to Burkina Faso. No entourage, no red carpet, just him, a small backpack, and a heart carrying a storm of emotion. As the plane lifted off, he looked out the window and whispered, "I don't know what waits for me, but I know it's real. I don't know what I'm walking into," Denzel thought, "but I know I have to go." Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré stood silently by the palace window, eyes fixed on the distant runway. An aide approached and asked softly, "Should we prepare the press?" Traoré shook his head. No cameras, no speeches, just truth. Something was about to unfold, something raw, honest, and powerful. And neither man could have guessed that in less than 48 hours, they would both cry again, this time, side by side. When Denzel's plane touched down, there were no reporters. No crowds, no lights, just stillness. A black SUV waited on the tarmac. Beside it stood a single man, dressed simply, no medals, no armor of power. It was him, President Ibrahim Traoré. Denzel stepped out slowly, their eyes locked. For a breathless moment, no words were necessary. They embraced not as an actor and a president, but as two men whose lives had collided across oceans, history, and fate. "I'm honored you came," Ibrahim whispered. Denzel gave a quiet smile. "I didn't come as a star. I came as a brother." The SUV rolled down dusty streets, past markets and modest homes. Children ran barefoot, waving at the Karuna of who rode inside. They reached a small, sun-worn house built of clay and tin. "This was my home," Ibrahim said quietly. He opened the door. Inside, no guards, no luxury, just old photographs, a worn mat, and silence thick with memory. Then, Traoré handed Denzel a faded photograph, a young boy clutching the hand of an older woman. "She raised me," he said. "When my parents worked, she fed me, bathed me, told me stories of courage," paused, voice softer, "and she's still alive." They drove again an hour through winding village roads. Neither spoke. Much. Denzel stared at the photo, a woman with a radiant smile, wise eyes, and the kind of strength that only time could shape. "Where is she now?" Denzel finally asked. Ibrahim's jaw tightened. "She still works. Cleaning classrooms in a rural school." Denzel turned toward him slowly. "She, Babu Traoré nodded. "She never asked for help. She always said, 'God gave me legs. I'll use them until he takes them.'" When they arrived, the school was weathered, but alive. Children played barefoot, sketching in the dust with sticks. Then she appeared, bent but proud, holding a broom. It was her, the same woman from the photo. Denzel stepped out of the car, frozen in place. Ibrahim walked toward her. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Ibrahim," she breathed. He rushed into her arms. "Mama Hawa," they wept together. Then Denzel stepped forward. She looked at him and gasped. Her hands trembled. You're him," she whispered, touching his face with awe. And in one quiet courtyard in Burkina Faso, time stood still. 3 souls, 3 stories, 1 sacred moment. A moment that would melt hearts across the globe. But what followed would shake a nation. Mom Kahu sat between Denzel and President Traoré beneath the shade of a giant baobab tree near the school. Her hands were calloused, her back curved with age, but her voice held warmth. I spoke of young Ibrahim, how he would cry in her lap on cold nights, how once he gave her his only mango because she hadn't eaten. Denzel listened, his eyes soft, his soul listening deeper than words. Then she reached into her apron pocket. "I kept this," she said, voice trembling. "All these years." She pulled out a yellowed folded paper, a child's handwriting. It read, "One day I will be a leader, and I will find you, Mama. I promise." Ibrahim's breath caught. "I wrote that," he whispered. "I was 9. It was her birthday. She gave me her only piece of bread." Denzel wiped a tear. "She held on to hope," he said. "That's the rarest kind of faith." Suddenly a barefoot child ran toward them, laughing, holding a cracked plastic ball. "Mama, Will you play? And she did. Still barefoot, still smiling. But inside Denzel, something shifted. He was no longer just a visitor. He had found something sacred. That evening, Denzel and Traoré returned to the palace. Had changed. They said little. Their silence carried weight. Then Ibrahim stood up. I want to show you something I've never shared outside my family. He led Denzel down a quiet corridor. Stone walls. No guards. Just their footsteps echoing. At the end was a heavy wooden door. He unlocked it. Inside was a small room. Dimly lit filled, the room was small, dim, and full of time, with old books, worn journals, faded maps, and one large framed photo. Mama Hawa and a young Ibrahim, both laughing without a care in the world. This, Traoré said softly, is my real treasure room. Denzel was speechless. The president picked up a weathered notebook. Inside were handwritten dreams, sketches of hope, his very first visions for a better Burkina Faso. All of this, he said, started with her. I'm only here because she believed I was worth something, even when I had nothing. Denzel ran his fingers over the page reverently. You lead like a son who never forgot what love feels like. Traoré nodded slowly. And I want the world to understand. Leadership isn't about power, it's about gratitude. The room fell silent. Two men, one a statesman, one a storyteller, bound by a single purpose, to honor the woman who shaped a president. And that's when Denzel had an idea. One that would take everyone by surprise, especially Mama. Haha. At dawn, Denzel sat quietly on the palace terrace, watching the sun climb over the rooftops of Ouagadougou. He could still see her face, her laughter, her strength. It echoed in his soul. Then Ibrahim joined him. I had a thought. Denzel said, sipping tea, let's give her the honor she never asked for. Traoré smiled, slow. Sure, I was hoping you'd say that. That afternoon, quietly and without notifying a single reporter, they drove back to the village school. A small team joined. Them, children gathered. Teachers stood watching in hushed anticipation. Mama looked confused. What's happening? She asked softly. Then, President Traoré knelt before her in full humility and opened a small velvet box. Inside, a golden medallion engraved with her name and the national seal. For your service to this nation, he said, voice trembling, as a mother, a teacher, and a guardian of hope. The children burst into applause. Then Denzel stepped forward, eyes glistening. And from the world of cinema, he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket, I spoke with my producer this morning. Your story will become a film. Every cent it earns will go to ward-building schools in your name. Mama Hawa dropped to her knees, weeping. A woman who had spent a lifetime giving was now finally receiving. But the biggest surprise was still to come. 3 days later, Denzel returned to Los Angeles. He was booked for a major live TV interview. One of America's biggest talk shows. The evening was expected to be light red carpets, upcoming films, a few laughs. But behind Denzel's polished smile, something had changed. As the show went live and the host asked about his trip to Africa, Denzel paused. Then he asked, Can I take a call? The host blinked. Live. Denzel nodded. The crew scrambled. Moments later, the studio screen lit up, and there he was. President Ibrahim Traoré, live from Burkina Faso. The audience fell silent. Mr. Washington, Traoré said warmly, Your visit reminded us that kindness is not limited by geography. Then he added, You honored my people. Today I want to honor someone you inspired. He turned, and Mama Hawa appeared beside him, holding a phone. Her eyes shining. The audience gasped. Denzel's lip trembled. His hand shook. Traoré continued, You reminded the world that even those with the loudest voices must sometimes stop to listen. Then Mama Hawa, in gentle, broken English, whispered, Thank you, my son. Denzel bowed his head and wept, there, on live television. And so did millions watching around the world. Within minutes, the clip went viral. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about something far deeper. Twitter exploded. Hashtag Mama Hawa, hashtag President of Hearts, hashtag Denzel breaks silence from Paris to Johannesburg. From Tokyo to Atlanta, people shared their own stories of grandmothers, caretakers, quiet women who raised them, who gave them everything. An old photo Traoré hugging Mama Hawa in her clay kitchen became a global symbol. Major news networks interrupted their usual political coverage to show that moment. Denzel in tears. Traoré speaking softly. Mama Hawa saying, "Thank you." CNN called it the most human thing ever captured live on television. But something even more incredible began to unfold. Donations began pouring in. A humble GoFundMe page, created quietly by a student at the village school, had aimed to raise $10,000 in just 2 hours. It passed $1 million, because people didn't just watch, they felt, and they acted, in a world often torn apart by division. Story of a soldier's mother, a Hollywood star, and a grateful son became something else entirely. A movement, promise, a mother's love, and an actor's tears were now uniting strangers around the world. But while the world watched, Mama Hawa was fading. She had one final request. By the 6th day of that unforgettable week, her body had grown weary. She had smiled endlessly, embraced dozens, spoken with presidents and stars, but now her strength was whispering goodbye. She felt it. And so, she asked to speak in private with Denzel and Ibrahim. They entered her small village room. No cameras, no microphones, just 3 souls. "I'm old," she said softly. Her voice was fragile but firm. "Won't see. The next planting season." Both men shook their heads, pleading with her to rest, to fight, to stay strong. But she smiled gently. "I'm not afraid. I've made my peace, my only wish is that no child in Burkina Faso ever walks into school hungry." A tear fell quietly down Ibrahim Traoré's cheek. She reached for Denzel's hand. "You tell stories that move hearts. The world listens when you speak. Tell this one." Then, from beneath her pillow, she pulled a small, worn scarf. Faded, torn, but stitched with love. "This," she said, placing it in Ibrahim's hands, "was what you tied around my arm when you played president." She smiled again, her eyes wet with peace. "My first medal," she whispered. And then her final words, "Take care of each other." They both held her as she closed her eyes for the last time. Outside, the sun was rising, so too. Her legacy. President Ibrahim Traoré stood still beside her bed, the scarf clutched tightly in his hands. The room smelled of shea butter and old paper memories. Denzel knelt at her feet, head bowed, shoulders trembling. Then in a low voice, Traoré spoke. "She gave me everything when I had nothing. Now, I will give everything in return." He turned to Denzel, holding up the scarf like a sacred emblem. "We will build something in her name, a school, a garden, a future." Denzel looked up, eyes red and swollen. "Yes," he said, voice cracking. "Yes, we will. I'll help." Outside, the villagers had gathered. They knew. Somehow, they knew. Traoré stepped out into the crowd and lifted the scarf high. "Mama has gone to rest," he said, voice steady.
"But
her spirit will feed generations." The crowd broke. Tears, prayers, embraces. A nation mourning its quiet matriarch. Within 12 hours, the news was global. Burkina Faso declares National Day of Mourning for Mama Hawa. That evening, Traoré stood before the press and made a solemn vow. Every child in Burkina Faso will know her name, and Denzel. He quietly canceled all upcoming appearances. "I've played kings. I've played generals," he told one outlet. "But today, I serve a mother." The next morning, the sun rose softly over Burkina Faso. In the center of the village square stood a simple wooden casket. No velvet ropes, no polished gold, just wildflowers, drums, silence. President Traoré walked behind it alone, carrying only the scarf. Denzel followed, suit wrinkled from sleep, his eyes hollow with grief. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. From across the world, leaders sent condolences. But the message that touched hearts most came from a barefoot boy in Niger who walked 2 days just to deliver a handwritten letter. It read, "Thank you for raising our president." As the casket was lowered into the ground, the village began to sing. Children wept. Elders placed hands on their hearts. A bird landed gently on the grave and stayed there. Then something happened, something no one expected. Denzel stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace, worn silver, weathered. "It was my father's," he whispered. "She reminds me of him, strong, quiet, never asked for anything." He placed it gently on her grave. "Goodbye, Mama." Even the cameras lowered. Some moments are too sacred for screens. That night, under a sky full of stars, President Ibrahim Traoré and Denzel Washington sat on a straw mat beside a quiet fire. No press, no speeches, just silence and smoke. They had just buried the woman who shaped them both, one with her hands, the other with her heart. After a long pause, Ibrahim said, "Denzel, this week I remembered who I am." Denzel nodded. "Me too." There, in that quiet African night, they made a vow. Not one signed with ink, but sealed in sorrow, gratitude, and unshakable hope. By sunrise, plans had begun for the Mama Hoa Foundation, a joint mission to feed, educate, and uplift rural children in Burkina Faso and beyond. And Denzel, he pledged his entire year's salary to it. Denzel pledged the entire earnings from his next film to the cause. But the most powerful moment wasn't the money. It was a short video he released. Just before flying home, in it, Denzel looked straight into the camera, his eyes tired but burning with something new. "If one woman in a small village," he said, "can raise a future president and change the heart of a Hollywood actor, then what are we waiting for?" That video reached 100 million views in just 24 hours. The world held its breath. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. 3 days after the funeral, Denzel returned to the U.S. quietly. No reporters, no limousines, no fanfare. But the producers of a long-scheduled live interview pushed ahead. It had already been promoted across every major network. Millions were expected to tune in. Denzel agreed. On one condition, let me speak from the heart. No script. The set was bright, the audience buzzing. Everyone anticipated light conversation, a few laughs, maybe a movie teaser. Then the host asked, "Denzel, you've traveled the world. What's one moment that changed your soul?" Denzel paused. No words at first, just movement. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the scarf. He held it gently. Then, into the microphone, he whispered, "President Ibrahim Traoré called me, and I couldn't breathe. Because he reminded me that greatness doesn't live in awards. It lives in mothers who wash your wounds, and in presidents who remember them." The host looked puzzled. "And what exactly did he say?" Denzel's eyes welled up. He pulled out his phone, tapped play, and let the room listen to a recorded voice. Traoré's words echoed across the studio. "Thank you for honoring a woman the world forgot, but who made a man the world remembers."
Silence.
Denzel broke. Right there, on live television, he sobbed. Clutching the scarf to his chest, the moment exploded. Dinner tables paused. Newsrooms stopped typing. Social media rose, and the clip of Denzel weeping, holding that piece of cloth as Traoré's voice played, became the most shared video of the year. The comments flooded in. "I've never cried this hard over a stranger's love. This made me want to call my mom right now. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Because the world needs more leaders like him." Across Africa, forgotten mothers' stories began surfacing. In the U.S., youth groups held candlelight vigils for Mama Hoa. But in Burkina Faso, something even more beautiful happened. Children from tiny villages began writing letters. Not to Santa, not to celebrities, but to President Traoré. One letter read, "If I work hard like you, will I make my mother proud too?" Denzel stayed silent after the interview, till the next morning. He posted a single photo on Instagram. A lone tree in Burkina Faso. The caption read, "She watered roots that now hold up nations. No hashtags, no promo, just truth." And the world watched and wept. Exactly 1 week after the call that started it all, a statue was quietly unveiled in Ouagadougou. Not of a general, not of a king, not of a president, but of a woman, holding a child's hand, wrapped in a familiar scarf. The bronze plaque below read, "To Mama Hawa, the mother of all leaders." President Ibrahim Traoré stood beside it, Denzel Washington at his side. Each held a candle. Neither spoke, because some endings are too sacred for words. That night, a soft wind moved through the city. The villagers whispered, "Mama Hawa's spirit is still with us. You can feel her in the breeze." Back in Hollywood, Denzel made one final gesture. He launched a scholarship, the Hawa Fund. In partnership with the government of Burkina Faso, it would support girls from rural Africa, girls who dream of leading. When reporters begged him for quotes, Denzel simply said, "Some phone calls. Change your schedule. This one changed my soul." Dear viewers, if this story moved your heart, that made you cry, made you reflect, or reminded you of someone you love, like, share, subscribe, and in the comments below, write, "I believe in the power of love and leadership. Your words matter." Let's make stories like this travel across borders, across languages, across hearts. Let's remind the world that greatness isn't built on fame. It's built on love. Drop your thoughts below. Share this with someone who needs a little hope today. And never forget, one kind act can echo across generations. Thank you for watching.